There are many ways to censor ideas, some discrete, and we're going to look at the ardently left-wing American Library Association's hypocrisy in censoring one way or another what it doesn't like, messages that go against its socio-political absolutism. The proclamation that it has an Office of Intellectual Freedom that supposedly defends free speech is preposterous. ALA has become very much a self-proclaimed advocacy operation, promoting drag queen story hours in libraries, critical race theory wherein all whites are implicitly decried to be racist, critical librarianship wherein a subjective, woke, socio-political dictatorship is encouraged instead of traditional notions of library neutrality, and on and on. Central to the ALA's posture is an innate hypocrisy. An advocacy organization cannot, by definition, have a sincere interest in free speech and intellectual freedom because that would entail allowing honest, open discourse, including arguments against its own advocacy positions. The ALA is only interested in very particular strands of intellectual freedom, those that buttress its own socio-political views, while it neglects or outright censors opposing perspectives. In this way, the ALA's Office of Intellectual Freedom is farce, quite the way Chairman Mao or Hitler had departments of truth too, in heralding their respective views of social justice. Something like, yes, we celebrate intellectual freedom, but it must follow our narrow parameters. The story of the ALA's manipulation, hypocrisy, and deception per issues of free speech is long, and it is becoming increasingly censorial. There's much to address, but in this video, let's begin with a movie that the American Library Association's own Office of Intellectual Freedom created in 1977. It cost $100,000 to make, and depending on how you discreetly parse the word censorship, the American Library Association came very close to censoring, banning, incredibly, its own creation. Once the movie was finished and viewed in a vote to disassociate the ALA from its own film, nearly half of those ALA members entitled to vote wanted the ALA to abandon its own baby, 318 votes to 334. Rather embarrassing for an organization that has always claimed to be an expert about and bastion for intellectual freedom. The ALA apparently pulled its own movie from public view and for all practical purposes banned it for decades. The movie is entitled The Speaker, a film about freedom. Have you ever heard of it? Probably not. I only became aware of it while reading a book by Marxist librarian and ALA activist Elaine Harger, who argues not only that the film should never have been made, but that the film should never be seen. What? It sounds surreal, perhaps a joke, a parody of some kind. A film produced by the ALA's Office of Intellectual Freedom about free speech shouldn't be seen because it's too controversial? And it came perilously close to being outright censored by the organization that made it? The film wasn't even posted on the internet until 2014, and truly, in the socio-political climate of our times, one wonders how long it will remain there. You can get a clue about what's going on here when you are told that the film's intent was to, quote, address one of the most important aspects of freedom of expression, toleration of ideas we find offensive or repugnant, unquote. George Orwell argued the same, saying that in essence, the very concept of intellectual freedom is meaningless if it isn't implicit that someone may dislike, even be outraged by what you have to say. Orwell put it this way: if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. And you've probably heard the old liberal adage attributed to many authors: I disapprove of what you say, but I would defend to the death your right to say it. These quotes are the essential point of the ALA's own movie. In testing the limits of toleration, one is forced to examine the foundation of the very idea of genuine free speech. Profound questions arise. In a free society, isn't it presumed that people have the right to say things others don't like? Is there a boundary to what you can say if others get upset? Is there a line of toleration wherein free speech should not be allowed? If so, Who gets to decide this border? And if one assertion of free speech is denied, why not another? Then another, then another. Where will it end? Why should it end? If intellectual freedom is subject to the socio-political convictions of whoever is in power, only allowed within a particular range, subject to the current popular convention or even the complaint of one offended individual. Is hustling pornography to children and young adults in libraries really an expression of intellectual freedom? This ALA movie is a fictionalized account with actors and actresses in a high school scenario. An extremely controversial speaker, a guy named Boyd, has been invited to lecture at the school, and the film chooses a topic for controversy that has the accelerator all the way down. The prospective speaker in the film is based on a real-life professor of the era named William Shockley, a physicist who shared a Nobel Prize, who believed that blacks are mentally inferior, and other profoundly controversial associative convictions related to that premise. The movie features an elderly teacher who is an advisor to a student affairs group, and although she disavows the speaker's beliefs, she believes the man should be allowed to speak based on her own convictions about the tenets of free speech in a democratic society. Let people have all access to information and decide for themselves what is true and what is false. To prohibit anyone's view is dangerous. If one voice is silenced, why not another? And another and another. In the face of all sorts of controversy, her students vote to invite the man to speak. But administrators and politicians overturn their decision, and the man is forbidden to speak.
Victoria, there's a lot going on. I'm getting letters, calls. The entire community's really up in arms about this Boyd thing.
The film ends with a soliloquy about free speech by the teacher. In other words, the film's undergirding lens throughout frames this woman as a kind of free speech heroine in the face of widespread censorial adversity.
The James Boyds of this world have a right to speak. As much right as the rest of us, who don't hold views unpleasant and unpopular. But we cannot know permanently what is right and what is true. And so we must never give in to the temptation to suppress what we don't believe in or agree with or find painful to hear. That's my view of our history. Now, I've told you what I believe. It's up to you to decide what you believe.
Maybe the best way to allow free speech is to have a counter view presented, equally, at the same time, something you'll be scarce to find in America's leftist propaganda libraries today. What would have been the case if there had been a second invited speaker at the same event in this film, in civil debate, someone who would have countered the racial views of Mr. Boyd and perhaps could have been a highly informed, brilliant black intellectual?
Acclaimed linguist and award-winning author John McWhorter. His latest book, Woke Racism, How a New Religion Has Betrayed Black America. It argues that today's anti-racism is hurting black communities and weakening American society. John, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on. Now, you've said that you see wokeness as akin to a religious doctrine, and you call its followers the elect. Explain what you mean.
Well, what I mean is not that it's wrong to be awakened to oppressive realities, which is what woke meant about 10 minutes ago. But I mean, there's a certain kind of woke person who feels that it's their job to get people fired and to make people cry and to call people names and to call people white supremacists if they disagree with a very narrow, punitive way of looking at how race works. And I think that what's really going on is that all of us are so scared of being called a racist on social media that we pretend to agree with these people. And if this goes on much longer, these people's way of looking at things is going to be the way everything works. And I don't think that's what any of us want, except that sliver of what I call the elect.
At core, censorship sucks. There's no greater way to disprove a thesis than to expose it to light. Period. And if you believe that an audience is innately composed of dupes and corruptible morons, you cede the principles of democracy to what? We all then, for example, surrender our own intelligence and morals to, in today's world, politically activist library bureaucrats who declare themselves to be experts in curating information, positioning themselves to control what is and what is not decreed to be, in the vernacular of the day, fake news. And it is routinely argued, even by librarians, that whatever they deem to be misinformation should be censored, or, as a more genteel form of censorship, ignored.